just interject with your picks or something and keep going if that's where we're at.
Yep. Cool.
Or we may just wrap up. You got a haircut, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a haircut as well. For the first time in, I think 3 years, my hair's actually short.
Right.
So it makes such a difference, right?
Yeah.
Every so often, I just shave it off for me. So it's because if I don't like it, I just get that. I call it the clown ring around the back of my head. And so I may, I'm just like, it looks less weird if I just shave it off. So anyway. All right. I should play with the brand on this a little bit. Let's see. Yeah. I can put a logo on here. It's super fancy. Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
Nice. Ooh.
I'm going to do the same thing for the background, and then we'll start. There we go. Doesn't that look cooler? I think that looks
fancy.
Cooler.
Yeah, very fancy.
Yeah, now I just need to save it. Rename brand. Ruby Rogues. All right. Now we'll see if it remembers it. All right. All right, I'll just get us started. Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Ruby Rogues podcast. This week on our panel, we have Valentino Stoll.
Hey, now.
I'm Charles Maxwood from Top End Devs. And we also have Ayush Nuatia. I always feel weird like I'm saying it wrong.
No, you're right. Absolutely right.
So, so we were getting on. We didn't have a guest this week. I keep inviting people, and then for whatever reason, they don't get on our calendar. So if you have a topic you want to talk about, let us know. But yeah, Ayush is new to the show, and we were chatting, and next week we're going to talk with him about Bridgetown. But I thought, you know what? Let's get to know him a little bit and kind of get his background on things. So Ayush, I'm kind of curious. I don't know exactly where to start. I like the idea of starting how you got into Ruby, but you were doing other stuff before Ruby, so maybe we start with how you got into programming and then kind of move along from there.
Yeah, for sure. I think I started at the beginning. I came through a fairly traditional route. I think I studied computer science at university, although I like to say that course doesn't count because it was quite shit. There's
a debate. Should you go to college to become a programmer?
Probably not. But as I grew up in India, I moved to the UK, to London for university. And despite not learning maybe a whole lot about actual practical industry programming at university, it did give me the degree that I needed to get a work visa here. So
okay.
it helped in that regard. But I mean, the course was just so like basic that they just taught Java, and it was like I had no idea how to run code outside of Eclipse, like when Eclipse was the more popular IDE over IntelliJ or whatever. I honestly, I didn't know how to write a unit test. I'd completely clueless about what to do if I didn't have Eclipse. And it was, yeah, when I got my first job, I was like, okay, the real world's fairly different.
So I have to ask, first of all, because I did Java, and now when I talk to people who are going to college, they're usually using Python. So how long ago was this? Like, are you an old guy like me, or are you a younger guy that just got into an old guy program?
I think a younger guy that got into an old guy program. I was
Okay.
at university 2011 to 2014, so not that long ago.
Okay. Right.
Um,
So you were in, because I went now I'm really going to date myself. I started in 1998, and I went for a couple of semesters, and I went on a mission for my church for 2 years. And then when I came back, I graduated in 2006. I came back started back in school in 2001. So not terribly too far apart, but yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Eh,
so I uh, I ended up getting a job straight out of university, which was nothing short of a minor miracle because it's so hard to get a work visa here in the UK.
oh, really?
But yeah, it's ridiculous. I just got super lucky. Um, I got a job at this company called AKQA, which is like an agency, and they were just starting this graduate program. So I was the first cohort. It was just me and another girl that were the first ever graduates in this graduate program that allowed me to kind of do a lot of many different things in the first year. So I kind of did Android development, I did DevOps, I did like software engineering
Oh,
and
wow.
all that kind of stuff, and ended up in this like hybrid iOS and Android role because my final year project, my dissertation project at university was an Android app. So I kind of ended up in mobile just through that, and I was iPhone user, Apple fan at the time, and so obviously I didn't really want to do Android development. It's just that I had to at university, so I kind of branched into iOS and ended up with this unique skill set where I could do both. So the company put me to work on both. Um, and yeah, I worked there for a while. Then just obviously I gravitated towards iOS because I'm a bigger Apple fan
Mm-hmm.
than an Android fan. I still despise Android. It's just so bad for my blood pressure every time I have to go and write any Android code. um, so yeah, then I ended up getting another job at a company called TransferWise, now known as Wise, and I was exclusively an iOS developer there. Managed to shake off my Android roots, thankfully. Yeah, I worked there for
So
a
were you
couple of
doing
years.
Objective-C at the
I
time?
was I was doing Objective C for the first couple of years at AKQA because I was working on some legacy apps, and Swift was still pretty new, and the interop between Objective C and Swift was still a bit iffy. So we as a company didn't want to take a risk on it with damn good reason. I completely agreed with that decision. But when I moved over to TransferWise, they had just done like a significant overhaul of the app a few months before I joined, and it was all Swift. So I got to write Swift for a couple of years in like a production setting there, which was quite nice ish.
Yep. I remember when they made that switch. I was co-hosting the iFreak show at the time, and so I was talking about it. I wasn't actually writing anything in it, but it was definitely an interesting time period to be working in that and seeing some of the transitions that go on with some of that stuff.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a much needed overhaul. I am probably one of the rare breed that actually liked Objective C. I quite. It was a bit verbose, sure, but I felt it had a lot of a similar ethos to Ruby in terms of like meta programming and things like that. And I think one of the reasons that I was kind of I moved away from mobile development, one of many reasons, but one of them was that Swift was becoming like what I perceived to be the Javafication of Swift, where I felt I just felt that the team were kind of chasing like quote unquote academic perfection from the language rather than building features that were actually useful. And all like the dynamic advanced stuff that you got with Objective C, they were kind of making an effort to remove that from Swift.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wasn't a fan of that direction at all.
Interesting. So, at what point did you find and move over to Ruby? I'm curious.
So it was just before the pandemic. So when I joined TransferWise as 2017, I actually knew that I would leave in exactly 2 years, because you need 5 years on a work visa in the UK to get residency. And while you're on a work visa, your visa is tied to your employer, so you
Uh-huh.
can't quit without getting kicked out of the country, basically. So I was just waiting for like residency period to kind of qualify for residency, apply for it, and then quit, really. So it's summer 2019 that I quit Transwise, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take a few months off here because I'm burnt out as hell and I need time off.
Right.
So I took a few months off, and I'm like, I just really don't fancy mobile development anymore. I was getting quite fed up of it. I also kind of get quite a lot of my motivation from product development. I don't get it from like technical problems. I like building products. I don't really care for that.
Right.
I don't care that much for like interesting technical problems. And it's quite hard to build products when all you can do is build a mobile app. Like if you have no server side skills at all, uh, there's not a lot you can
Yeah.
do with just an app, right? So I was finding that quite limiting in what I wanted to build, or had the skill set to build. So I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna move to web, because in the web world, if I can build it, I can deploy it and release it and sell it. In the mobile world, I need Apple to let me sell it, no matter how stupid it might be. Like Apple might just say, like I might invest months into something, and then Apple could just turn around and say, "Yeah, we're not going to approve that app." So I just didn't like that kind of aspect of it either. So I'd kind of been exposed to Ruby a fair amount just while working on iOS, because a lot of the infrastructure around iOS was in Ruby. Like until Swift got its native package manager, the most popular dependency in package manager in the iOS world was called Cocoa Pods, which
Yep.
is written in Ruby.
It's written in Ruby, which is
Yeah,
yeah.
and there's
We had those guys on iFreaks, and it was kind of funny because I was nerding out about Ruby with them, and on an island.
yeah, exactly. So like there was like other bits, like there's a CI tool called Fastlane, which just makes it quite
Uh-huh.
easy to build like a CI pipeline for iOS and stuff.
I
That
think
was
John
in
Epperson wrote that, didn't he?
No, it's Felix Kraus.
Oh, Felix. Okay.
Yeah. Um at least it was initially him. Fairly sure it was initially him. It might be because I think it was bought by Twitter and then Google, and then it changed hands a
Okay.
few times. I don't know where it's ended
I'm
up
probably
now.
getting it mixed up with something else.
Yeah. Um so that was in Ruby as well. So I'd kind of done a bit of Ruby just because I had to deal with that stuff in the iOS world, and I quite like the language. I like the Rails ethos and stuff. So
Uh-huh.
I just bought the Rails tutorial by Michael Hartle, and that's basically a rite of passage, isn't it? You're allowed to be a Rails developer if you haven't worked through that book.
Well,
So
I've never gone through the book.
uh, how dare you? No, I'm kidding.
Well, I remember when he wrote the book. I've been around that long, so
Fair enough. Um, so yeah, I worked through that book. I built a product. I built a very simple blogging app called Chapter 24, which I recently decommissioned. Actually, need to write about that, I think, because a lot of people talk about the successes, but they don't really talk about things that didn't quite work. So I want to write a blog about why I built it and then why I decommissioned it.
right.
But yeah, kind of just on the back of that, I kind of got into freelancing because I somehow ended up on the Bridgetown core team around that time as well. So this was all through 2020 that I was retraining as a Ruby developer, building Chapter 24, and then the back half of 2020, I ended up on the Bridgetown core team, which I think is probably best to get into next week.
Uh-huh.
And then just through sheer dumb luck, ended up with freelance. I knew I wanted to freelance, but just through the sheer dumb luck of Twitter, ended up getting a contract. And as you know, with uh, in the Ruby world or any tech world, like the hardest thing with freelancing is getting the start. So
Mhm.
once I had that first contract, which I worked with those guys for quite a while. I think it was over a year that I worked with them, and then it just snowballed from there. Really, I wrote the book, took a few months off, wrote the book, and then it's been for that I think changed the trajectory of my career fairly significantly when I released the Rails and Hotwire Codex, because now I just tend to find work. It's become so much easier because I can just point to this ridiculous brick of a book that I've written, and then people are like, "Oh, would you like to work with us?" And that's a very privileged position to be in. I'm incredibly grateful to be in that position. But yeah, that kind of brings us to where we are now.
Nice. So, are you finding work? I'm just curious, and I'm just going to ask whatever questions I want. A lot of times, I'm kind of steering the conversation a little bit, because I think that people are going to want to know a specific thing, or you know, learn a specific thing, or I think it'll be helpful, even if somebody doesn't think to ask it. I'm just going to ask what I want because I'm
Yeah,
curious. So,
yeah, go for
how
it.
much work comes in off of the Rails and Hotwire Codex? Because it sounds like you kind of at least implied that brings you some of the freelance work.
Yeah, a fair amount. So like my previous client I worked with for about 15 months, and I had posted on a number of forums at the time because I was some work I had lined up fell through, and I was quite desperate for work at the time. And I posted on a number of forums saying, "I've written this book and I've built this, that, and the other thing."
Mhm.
And I signed that contract without ever having a call with the client. They just saw my work and they're like, "Oh yeah, can you start Monday? Here's the contract." And I was with them for like 15 months or so. And then earlier this year in about March, I published an update to my book for Strada and Rails 7.1. And I sent out a mailing blast to my mailing list for the book. And I said at the end, "Oh, by the way, I'm looking for some freelance work. My contract just ended. If you have anything, do get in touch." And I got an email back from someone who was working with this startup saying, "Oh, we're looking for Rails developers. This is a company I'm working with. Are you interested?" I was like, "Yeah," and I've been working with this startup since March, and that was just through a lead from someone who bought my book. And since then, I've had 2 or 3 emails from other people who've discovered me through my book asking if I was available, and I've had to say no because I'm fully booked on this contract. So it's always nice to kind of have leads
Mhm.
that I kind of have to say no to at this point, but hopefully I can work with in the future at some point.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences. Not with the, I did write a book, but it was how to find a job. Um, I've had that with screencast series and with the podcast, where, yeah, you know, I just mention on the show or have people come to me out of the blue. And yeah, it's been really interesting to see how that all works out. So, um, yeah, I like the idea of writing a book and demonstrating your technical expertise and having people recognize that, and then come along and say, "Oh, I'm interested in what you can do," and have
Yeah,
that work show up.
exactly. I think it's the best way to kind of showcase your skills, just build something that it's all in the public domain, and
Mhm.
it kind of also acts as an asset. So like, I mean, I don't make a whole lot of money off the book sales, but it's a nice like cream at the end of the month that kind of adds on top of my freelance income.
Right.
And yeah, it's just a great way to generate leads and stuff. So like I always kind of planned that with my freelancing career I would split my time between client work and my own projects. And that's why I have the Rails and Hotwire Codex. That's why I have scattergun.email, which is another SaaS product that I run. It's temporarily on pause. I really need to invest some time to bring it back. But yeah, that's why I have those things, because those are the things that kind of I have complete control over. I don't need to make compromises to anyone, and it's very fulfilling to have that kind of stuff as well.
I'm curious. I never knew you wrote a book. First of all, awesome.
Right?
I love it. I have so many questions.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
Uh,
the book is railsandhotwirecodex.com.
Yeah, it's really cool. So like what got you to build this specifically? Just like your mobile experience transitioning to Rails? Like
Uh, yeah, kind of. So when I was working on my first contract as a freelancer, I had a pretty steep learning curve at the start because it was the first production Rails app that I was kind of working on uh, for someone else. The only before that I'd only kind of worked on my own projects. So I realized that I'd done the Rails tutorial by Michael Hartle, and I found that uh, it was great for the basics, but like that book, you only create two models by the end of the book. So it's like because it focuses so much on the basics, it's not representative of a production Rails app, and I found that next step was quite hard for me to take. So while I was on that first contract stint, the idea just kind of popped into my head that there's loads of books that teach you how to make Rails apps, loads of books that teach you how to make native apps. I've kind of got this unique blend of experience of all three where I've specialized in all three at various points. Turbo native was kind of a fairly new thing because this was mid 2021. So Turbo native was only about 6 months old. I was also aware of Turbo Links native, which had been around for a while. It was on
Mm.
my radar even when I was a mobile developer, and I had petitioned for its use a number of times to my teams when I was a mobile developer, and basically been told to, in no uncertain terms, to shut up because it was hybrid and hybrid was a dirty word. So
So
I thought,
hang on, because I have to chime in on this because there is a dirty little secret, and that is a lot of the apps that you use out there that are native apps, they pull in web UI all over the place.
they do, and yeah. The other thing is that most of these fully native apps are also completely useless offline. Like people kind of say offline access is a big thing. They kind of bandy around for fully native, but I'm like, yeah, most apps I've worked on useless offline. Like they won't
Right.
do anything.
Well, or they build in. So the thing that I'm thinking is like the video apps. So like your Hulu or Netflix or whatever.
Mm,
The only on offline functionality they really have is download this before you get on the airplane, and that way you
yeah,
can watch it on your phone,
yeah,
right? And so it's very limited in scope on what it'll do
yeah,
once you're offline.
yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, so I thought, yeah, here's a mad idea. I've only been working with Rails for less than a year, but let's write a book on it.
how
It
hard
was,
could it be, right?
yeah, how hard could it
Right.
be? Yeah, it turns out
Well, books are
very.
a ton of work, and his is like 900 pages. So
Yeah, I mean,
I was gonna say,
it was
I
so
love
difficult.
I love the
I mean,
premise, like building the neighborhood marketplace, like Craigslist or something. That can't be easy to do, right?
no, it's not easy, but I kind of need I learn best by doing. So I definitely wanted to teach how to build a product, and I needed a product that had scope for many things. And I just thought a product marketplace, I can just like any kind of feature I can kind of bolt onto it in some way or another. So it was just a very good kind of premise to cover all the features in Rails, because covering all of the constituent frameworks like your action, mailbox, active storage, all that was a non-negotiable for me. I had to do all of them. Uh, so this was just a nice vehicle for that. And
I mean, too, Rails is like pushing the, build your next business, right, with Rails,
mm,
yeah,
yeah,
right? And like selling something is like what everybody wants to do, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
so I think this is great. Like I love I'm curious, like what kind of design decisions do you make in the book for like the various things? Like do you choose to build your own authentication authorization? You know.
Yeah. So it is your own authentication authorization. I've kind of put that front and center in the marketing materials as well. And again, I just wanted to teach how to build as much as possible, and I was only pulling in gems for very specific, very difficult problems, because I find a lot of tutorials, they kind of just skirt around the difficult problems by pulling in a gem, and like authentication, or just use device, and then it becomes a
I'm
tutorial on
pretty
how to
sure
use.
that's what the Hardo book does. Is it pulls in device and then just moves on.
No, it doesn't. It teaches you.
Okay.
It teaches you your own
Oh, okay.
authentication. Yeah.
Happy to be wrong about that.
But a lot of tutorials, they just say, oh, just pull in this gem, pull in that gem for like device, pundit, whatever, and they don't teach like the concepts. And in freelancing, I've just found that because those concepts are not that widely taught, they're not applied very well, and people don't think about, do I actually need a gem for this, and they just pull in a gem just because it's the thing that they always do, even if it's a very simple authorization premise that the product has. It's like, oh, it's authorization, we need pundit for that. So I was like, no, let's just build everything from scratch. So like the only things I've used gems for are like things like paginations. I've got Pagey in there. I've got Sidekick, obviously, for background jobs. So yeah, just like very specific things. Actually, let me pull up the gem file right now so I can tell you which are the only third-party gems that I've pulled in here. Credis doesn't count as third party because Credis is now in Rails. So I've got pre-mailer Rails, which is to inline your styles before Action Mailer blasts something out. So that kind of holds up styling on all the different mail clients. Got something called ISO country codes, which just makes a drop down easier for like a country drop down easier, because it just kind of maps like a user friendly country name to the ISO code. Pagey for pagination, AWS SDK for S3, geocoder for geocoding, local time to show like your which is just JavaScript thing to show local time based on where the user is. Browser to detect which browser it is from the user agent, and email reply parser from which is a GitHub gem to kind of when you click reply on an email, clients will kind of just put a lot of gunk in at the bottom. This kind of just makes that a bit easier to deal with, which in Action Mailbox I needed. And apart from that, just Sidekick and Sidekick cron. Yeah, that's it. Everything else is from scratch.
So I have to ask because, I mean, I'm working for a client right now that uses. I mean, you mentioned Devise, Pundit. I think they're using Rollify, right? And some of these ideas like Rollify, right? As far as just the fundamental adding and tracking if somebody has a role and if that role attaches to some other entity in your system, right? That seems relatively simple. Pundit seems like it does a whole bunch of stuff, and sometimes I feel like it gets in my way, and sometimes I feel like it just kind of cleanly solves a problem. So how do you decide if something is in or out, and how do you decide if something's going to be worth the trouble of figuring out? Because some of these libraries have a learning curve, and
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm rambling, but I think you
No,
just know
yeah,
what I'm
no,
asking.
it's tricky. It's a hard question, and I don't have a clear answer, because the best thing I can say is just experience. So when I was in my first job out of university, I had a really good mentor. So that was an iOS developer back then, and I had a really good mentor, and he kind of ingrained this deep dislike and disdain for dependencies in my brain. So and that is stuck with me, and it's something I quite like. So I don't want to change it, because I like that fact about myself. So I will not pull in a gem until I'm like really pushed against the wall, and like I'm like, okay, now I really can't do this myself. I really shouldn't do this myself. Then I will pull in a dependency for it. Other than that, I'll just write it myself. Like I don't
Doesn't
know. I
that
just
take
think
more time? I mean,
uh,
isn't it more effort and more trouble?
it is, but it's also a lot more customizable and reusable. So so once I've done something, it's like I do my own authentication. So once I have my authentication system, that code is reusable. So I don't extract it into a library, but in every project, I just copy paste out the relevant stuff and then customize it. I,
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
and customize it as the project needs. And uh, yeah, I mean, it may sound like sacrilege, but it is a different mindset when you're kind of wrapping up some code as a black box library, because then it's kind of like its own entity, and you need like you need kind of ports to kind of interact with it. But if it's just code that lives as part of your application, you don't need to package it up in any way. You don't need to think about like, oh, what if the user wants to customize this, that, or the other thing, because you just change the code, right? Because it's within your application. I'm a
That
big
makes sense.
fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of just writing reusable code in that way, and I do it in like, it helps with my client work as well. Very often, I'll pull things out of my own projects and put them into client project, just because I've solved this problem. Why do I need to solve it again? So like, now I have like an authorization system that I built for the book, and I'll just build a similar system for any other project. So like, for me personally, I only need to build it once, and then I just need to tweak it to fit any other project. And for me, that's a lot less risky than pulling in a dependency that I don't control.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in on this a little bit. So the last one that I pulled in that I kind of had this with was actually written by Dave Kimura. It's
Okay.
the Action Auth gem, and right, I needed to tweak the layout, and I want to add a user profile, which I just did by adding another model to my system. But as I got into that just a little bit more here and there, what I found was that, because I was thinking, I'm a little bit gun shy about, hey, this is a security system on my app, right? And since I'm not a security expert, I don't know if I necessarily want to be the one writing this and responsible for it. But at the same time, you go look at Action Auth, and it's relatively simple.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's definitely something that I could build myself if I wanted to. It's just that he has a whole bunch of other people looking at it and solving some of the problems that I might cause myself. And he spent a lot more time looking into the issues that are there. And so that's one reason why I'm sitting there going, maybe I should, use somebody else's system. The other thing, though, is that, then it's okay. I've got to tweak the layouts. I've got to tweak this. I've got to tweak that. And so there's the learning curve of learning how to use the gem that for my time might take up just as much time as writing it myself. And I guess I don't actually know that. And I don't know how you know that, but those are the trade-offs that I'm looking at, right? Am
Yeah.
I going to cause a problem if I write it myself, or am I going to leave something open that I shouldn't? And then the other thing is for my time, right? If I drop Pundit in, or, Rollify or something else, how do I do that? And then the last thing is sometimes I pull in these gems because I have a client that's using it and I need to understand it. And so I can go play with it over here in my own little sandbox.
Yeah, exactly. Those trade-offs they're all really good questions to ask, and there's no like straightforward answer to any of that. It just comes down to like judgment. So actually, let me read out a quote that I've put in the coda of my book. It's a quote from Nate Hopkins. So
I love
uh,
Nate.
yeah. So yeah, he tweeted this a while ago now. So he says, every additional gem dependency adds friction to upgrading Rails. Be sure to apply a healthy dose of scrutiny to all gems before including them in your projects. You also increase the surface area of several risks: unexpected changes to native behavior, conflicts between gems, degraded performance, weakened security, and these risks compound as you drift further from the latest framework release. So I thought that was just a good way of looking at it. It just depends on it's like the use case or what you're trading off against. And I just find that very often you can accomplish quite a lot with just good object oriented programming. Like, authorization is one of those things where with these gems like Pundit and I think can and action policy and that stuff, they're good gems, but I just find that they go too far into like meta programming when all you need is good object oriented programming. And I think the absolute game changer has been something quite simple, which is active support current attributes. Just the fact that you can get current.user now from anywhere in your app. Earlier, it was you'd probably have a current underscore user method that's only available in your controllers. If you're trying to do like authorization stuff in your model, just getting hold of the current user might be a little tricky, which is why you had like meta programming techniques, which uh, gems like Pundit have kind of uh, popularized. But now that you can get your user quite easily from anywhere, it's a fairly simple thing. But I think it's also made a huge difference to how much you can simplify things like authorization.
Yep. So I guess the other question is, do you then favor gems like, so, back to authorization or authentication for a minute, right? Do you favor things like maybe authentication 0, where instead of it using an engine like Devise or ActionAuth does, you just do a Rails generate and it drops the code, right? It generates all the code into your thing, into your
Yes.
app, right? And then, I mean, if you pull the gem out, it's still going to work because all it did was just effectively write that code for you.
Yeah, exactly. So the client I'm working with at the moment, we've used authentication 0. It was done before I started, so I didn't have any influence on that. And it's the first time I've used authentication 0 actually, and I'd recommend it wholeheartedly to anyone. It's an approach that I absolutely love because the code's all in your app. You can modify it as you choose. So like we've actually had to modify the authentication system a little bit because one of the requirements were we needed Google login, but we also like if someone had signed up using email and password and then they tried to sign in with Google, we wanted them to kind of get into the same account. Like we didn't want Google sign in to create a new account, and that was obviously some custom logic that we had to do. But because all the code lived in our app, it was fairly easy to do. We
Right.
didn't need to jump through any hoops. All I did was modify a controller and done. And I like that. Like the amount of times I tried to wrangle Device to do something I wanted slightly custom, and felt like hitting my head against
Yeah.
the wall. I mean, this is much preferable to me.
Yep. That's that in my experience is where I run into things. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm deviating from how Device thinks about the world. And so, I feel like I've got my arm stuck in the gears of this machine and I can't quite pull it out in order to get
Yeah.
what I want. What about stuff like, so you said the Google login. So do you just reach for OmniAuth for that, or do
Yeah.
you write
Yeah.
your own for that?
No, OmniAuth. Yeah, like that's again, it's a difficult small surface area problem. So that's the kind of thing where I would reach for a gem because yeah, like gems that kind of cover quite a large surface area, and then your app kind of becomes heavily dependent on them. Like let's say like if you build an app with Devise, you're never ever ripping Devise out of there. It's there for life. It's like for the lifetime of the app, right? I will only pull in gems like that when I'm like absolutely 100% sure and I've really, really thought it through. And I'm like, this is the only way, it's a worthy risk. And then I'll pull in a gem that my app like literally will fall apart without. Other than that, I like small surface area gems.
Cool. Valentino, I hijacked your higher level question. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. I mean, it's an important important discussion to make anytime you're introducing new dependency, because it is just like a snowball effect of, if you ever want to remove it, it's a pain.
Yeah,
Or change
exactly.
Well, and
Yeah,
every time,
change it.
the last couple of contracts we've worked on upgrading Rails, and that is always painful. And it's always the dependency gems that you get, which was the other point that Ayush made.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's one of those things I think you get better at with experience. Like just my kind of take on it is I'm not against dependencies. I'm definitely not one for like not invented here syndrome or anything like that. But I'm also fairly skeptical of dependencies, and I just think like 2 or 3 times before I pull anything in. So it's not like I'm against. I just give it a lot of thought before I pull in a gem.
Right. Did you have any follow on to this, Valentino?
I did.
I'm so
I mean,
sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm often torn on like the dependency like hell that people reference. Like there are a lot of like great well built gems that like you can just throw in and trust that are going to work long term. And so it's like it's hard to know what those are if you're not familiar with them.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think it's a good rule of thumb to just like not introduce it if you don't have to. But at the same time, it's like whatever you build, you're gonna have to maintain. So like whether you're not maintaining it or somebody else isn't maintaining it, like does it matter?
Yeah, it's true. And I think also if you're pulling in like a gem that's not like super popular or something like that, I think it's also important to just have a high level understanding of what the gem does. So like if I'm pulling in a gem where I'm not completely clear about how it solves the problem that I want to solve, and if it's not like super popular or anything like that, I'll always dive into the source code and try to understand it. And if I can understand and I'm happy with it, I'll pull it in, or otherwise I might just take inspiration from their approach and write it myself. Like quite recently for the client I'm working with, we needed to have like some kind of debounce logic in Sidekick. So like if you try to queue up the same job with the same arguments like 2 or 3 times in quick succession, it should only queue up once. So like if you try to queue up a job like 10 times in 2 minutes, it only executes once. So I went looking for a plugin for this and I found one, but I firstly dove into the source code because it wasn't a very popular gem. It was not something I'd heard before. It didn't have a very high star count or anything like that, and it was doing a bunch of stuff that I didn't quite understand. It was running a Lua script on Redis and things like that, and I'm like, yeah, not sure about this one. So I spent one day and just kind of took a little bit of inspiration from their approach and built out a super simple solution myself in like I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours or something. And now we own that solution. So if we need to tweak it, we can. It lives in the lib folder of our own app. Other developers can just open that up, read it, understand it, and that's it, rather than hiding away in a gem that nobody understands.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said there, right? Like, you know, you can still package it locally like it is a separate project.
Yeah.
Like use Packwork or you know, something like that. Just to keep things separate in case it, you know, I feel like the most common use cases are, well, like, you know, we want other people to be able to contribute to it, right? And that's what
Yeah.
the value of the gem brings. But you know, it's not guaranteed to do that. But I feel like if you just keep it abstract enough, like, you know, it solves most of the cases in the long term.
Yeah, but that's the trade-off too, right? Is if it's too abstract, then it loses utility. But if it's too specific, it also loses utility. So you've kind of got to find that sweet spot too.
I think a good rule
Yes,
of
I'm
thumb is
curious.
like, sorry, go on.
I was going to transition to something different.
Okay, so I'll just wrap up this
Yeah.
this conversation. I think a good rule of thumb is like, could I build this myself in 4 to 6 hours? If you could, it's probably worth building it yourself.
like
If it's gonna take longer, then the gem probably makes a lot more sense.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a good rule of thumb. Yeah, I was gonna transition like because, you know, you tackle Hotwire, you know, specifically here, and you dive deep into turbo natives and that whole aspect of, you know, mobile application development, if you want to call it that, even
Yeah,
for Rails.
yeah.
You know, how is your experience like setting that up? Like, what do you think of the turbo native framework as somebody who previously worked in the, you know, mobile on both sides, you
Yeah.
know, realms? You know, how does the developer experience like equate in Rails and in turbo native
You're
framework?
going to hurt someone's feelings answering this.
No, I don't think so. Actually, I quite enjoyed it, to be honest. I think it's a great approach, just because it's kind of like uh, a little bit in this world, a little bit in that world. So like your navigation and stuff is fully native. So you're not fighting against the platform you're on. So you're still writing Swift, you're still writing Kotlin. There's no escaping that. It's just that instead of writing the content of the screen using native views, you render some HTML and CSS instead. And you kind of and both iOS and Android have native APIs to communicate to and from JavaScript. So that's what Strata does. It just kind of uses those native APIs, gives you an abstraction layer to send messages back and forth from your web app to the native code. So you can like render fully native components around your web views. So it kind of just ups the fidelity a little bit. And let's say you have like one screen where where your app's users spend most of their time. You can always kind of build that one screen fully natively and then leave the rest to be web views. So as an approach, I really like it. The developer experience is obviously, it's not without its challenges, because you're kind of working in JavaScript as well. So debugging JavaScript on mobile can be a bit painful at times. So there is that, but then you're always going to have some friction with this kind of approach. But on the whole, I think the amount of time and money you save is huge. And I gave a talk at some conferences last year called "Native Apps Are Dead. Long Live Native Apps." I think the Friendly RB, uh, I think Friendly RB have put a YouTube video out of this talk, and that was the whole premise of the talk. Is that here's a really great way to build hybrid apps without kind of fighting against the platform, still having access to all the native features, and just like uh, leaning on the web to reduce your work, really.
So
But
I'm curious, like, what does the communication layer look like for like the JavaScript to native like aspect of it? Like, let's say you wanted to like render a native like camera component or something like that, right? Like, how does that like translate to like the website?
So that's where Strata comes in. So you'll have to write some native code to accomplish that. So like the way Strata works is it's a subset of stimulus. So it actually subclasses a stimulus controller to another class called bridge component. So that's kind of like the main centerpiece of Strata. So you would subclass bridge component on the web, and you'd kind of write some logic for whatever camera thing that you want to do. And then when that component connects to the DOM, it'll send a message with whatever you've defined in that component to your native code. And then you have to have like a counterpart component. So if you have a camera component on the web, you have to have a camera component in the native apps as well, which is like a fully native Swift or a Kotlin class. So that class will receive the message that your web app has sent, and then that can do whatever native thing it needs to do to make whatever you want happen. And then
So,
to go backwards again, like you would send a message to the web app to like, I don't know, click an element or a hidden element or something like that uh, in the web view. So that way you can have like a fully native button that's just a proxy for like a web element. So you can have like in your navigation bar, you can have like a login button that's fully native, but all it's doing actually under the hood is clicking a hidden login link on your web view.
I see. I mean, it sounds very similar to React Native.
Uh,
in
I
the
don't know.
bridging way.
I don't know a whole lot about React Native, but I think it's just a different philosophy. Where React Native, you're writing JavaScript, but the views that are rendered are all fully native views. With Turbo Native, you're rendering web content for the most
I
part.
see.
Yeah, it's a different bridge. It does use the JavaScript core bridge on iOS.
Yeah.
But the way it communicates with your app, because it's a web app, is different from how it communicates with a Turbo Native app, or not a Turbo Native, and React Native app. Because the React Native app, all of the logic is running on your phone using JavaScript and then interacting with the native views. And so it is a little different.
I could see how that would make for a better experience, Turbo Native. From a developer standpoint, I don't know if from a user standpoint, but
I think it's
It's,
highly dependent on the app.
yeah, I think like with any technology, you can build good apps with it. You can build bad apps with it. I mean, I've been using Hey for email pretty much ever since it came out, and I'm perfectly happy with their app. And their app is probably one of the flag bearers for Turbo Native. But yeah, it's not without its problems, and it can be a lot to deal with sometimes. So like actually when I released the update to my book, I announced as part of that update that the second edition, which I'll probably start working on next year, so it's still a little ways away, I'm going to remove all the native stuff from it. It's going to be PWAs all the way, just because
and hope that they run.
yeah, hopefully. But no,
Was that a joke at Apple's expense, or
Yes, very much so.
okay, just making sure.
Yeah, monopolies, right?
Yeah.
Well, just to throw it in, within the next week or so, we have an episode coming out from Bruce Lawson, and he talks about the open web initiatives and how a lot of the PWA stuff doesn't work on Apple and why. And yeah, he goes after him pretty hard. Anyway.
Yeah, Apple's not been covering themselves in glory recently, so
no.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, my reasoning for it is for removing the native stuff is that I've got both my feet in the web world. I haven't worked on a production Android code base since 2017 and a production iOS code base since 2019, and it's just getting too difficult for one person to maintain all this stuff, especially in an educational resource where I kind of need to know my shit a little bit. It's too stressful and too exhausting. And PWAs, when they work, big asterisk there, are pretty damn good. So I'm just gonna focus on those instead.
Right. Now Rails 8 is supposed to be focused on making
It
PWAs
is.
work.
It is, yeah. There's supposed to be a new sub framework called Action Notifier as well in Rails 8, which is going to be like web based push notifications. Right. So, yeah, with all that stuff, I just feel that I don't need to have a native section anymore. And like anyone who buys the book at any point will always have access to this first edition with the native stuff. So it'll always live on. So if anyone wants the basics are never going to change, right? The basics of Turbo Native and Strata are never going to change, and that's all I cover in the book. So hopefully it'll still have value to people, but yeah, like it can be a bit much for one person to try and do all three.
So are you targeting Rails 8 then in the next edition?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, so it's gonna be a paid upgrade for that reason. I probably won't start working on it until after Rails 8 is out. I haven't really got any plans for it or anything at the moment. So that all I know is it'll target Rails 8. It'll target whatever new stuff comes out in the framework. It'll be PWAs and it'll be a paid upgrade.
Cool.
I just wanted to call out, I love your little written by a human tag at the bottom of not by AI.
Cheers. You're not the first person to compliment me on that. I actually loved nice cheeky thing. It was I enjoyed putting that in there.
That's funny.
You have to specify these days.
You got to. I mean, how else are you gonna know?
Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else that we want to go after on this, or looking to?
Chuck, you've had some time with my book. Do you have any? I'm just blatantly asking for compliments here, but do you have anything you want to say?
So, to be perfectly honest, I started reading it. I mean, I have to say that this is like the busiest season of my life ever with my So my kids are finishing up school this week. I'm the vice chair of the Utah County Republican Party, and we're trying to push candidates over the line. So I've been doing all of that. And then I picked up a contract, and the contract is for 40 hours a week, like just a build 40 hours a week. And so that's a ton of time. So I haven't had a ton of time to get into it. I have gotten through the first bit. I have to say, like the deployment section, because you talked about deployment here, and I just kind of skimmed it because I deploy using Kamal to some
okay,
VPSs.
fair enough. Yeah.
But the setup was fairly good, and to be honest, some of this was stuff that was like, oh, I think I kind of knew that, right? And you kind of explicitly draw it out and point at it, and so that was helpful as well. And so so now I'm just getting into, okay, I want to build the app that I want to build. I just barely started creating the iOS app part of it. Because what I want is, and just to kind of give people an idea, what I'm doing is I'm walking through the book and I'm building the next version of Top End Devs. And so, because effectively what I want to build is, I keep telling people I want to build the Netflix of programmers, right? And it's a little different from kind of what Egghead or Pluralsight or some of the others do, where it's like, hey, go pick up this course. What I want to do is I want to have a number of series, kind of like Drifting Ruby or Railscast or something like that, but for different technologies, right? And so I would love to have an ongoing series on like Hotwire, have an ongoing series on just JavaScript fundamentals, right? And so every week you get a new video so that you can go pick up, basic DevOps. Some of the other frameworks that we cover on the network, so React or Angular, right? And so you kind of get the idea of where I'm going. But then the other thing I'd like to do is create sort of longer form content that's more, I guess, creative than technical. And so then it's, we have documentaries, or maybe an audio, what do they call them? Like an audio drama, right? Where you have, anyway, I'd love to have a podcast where people are actually acting.
Okay,
effects,
fair enough.
right? And so, you get some comedy out of how a team runs, right? And you have just that guy, right? That's anyway. So those kinds of things I kind of envision. And so, I want to build a platform that looks more like Netflix and less like Pluralsight, if that makes sense. And we still have the courses, right? So you could still go through a course and watch, okay, here's the 15-minute video on how to set up, and here's the 15-minute video on how to install, and here's the 15-minute video on how to use like the basics that you probably would recognize out of anything else that's similar. And then here's we're going to show you how to get it all set up and use it. But I really want to give people the full breadth of what they can get, right? And so if you are getting a bunch of programmers together, you can sit down and watch the thing, right? Whether it's a comedic take on a dev team, or a documentary on how a thing came about, or a technical walkthrough on how to use Vite or something like that. So anyway, and this kind of hits all of those places, right? Because you kind of have the slide out menus and the the kinds of interactions that you want from things. And I think you can get all of that out of Stimulus and Hotwire. And I've been doing Stimulus for a few years now. But anyway, so I'm just walking through this. But yeah, so the Turbo Native stuff really appeals to me because, I don't see a reason why you can't, okay, you want to watch the videos. So you pull up the app, you open the app, but the app just, mostly loads in, the videos and stuff. And then, maybe I have to do some work on it for some of the native stuff so that, if you want to download it and watch it offline, the website doesn't really do that. But
honestly, I think if you're going to do something like that, even through Turbo Native, I think the best way is probably just using service workers. So you're going to be in the web world anyway, and your website will end up supporting it anyway.
Right.
Because another analogy I kind of make in the talk I gave last year is that Turbo Native app is in a way is like uh, showing your website through a custom web browser. So the app shell, all it is in effect is a custom web browser.
Right.
The tabs and whatever is just your like a little bit of custom Chrome around what is effectively still your website.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of the point is I can build it once, I can put this wrapper around it, and then for anything that I have to tweak because it's mobile or because your phone has a different concern than the web does, right, then I can figure those pieces out. The other piece that I want to figure out, and I don't think it goes into it in your book, but I haven't seen any other examples of it either, is I'd love to get Turbo Native to make my app run on an Apple TV. Right.
Okay. Yep.
And things like that. And so, just figure those pieces out. But the promise of the book so far is, hey, I can have all those things. And so, so some of the stuff I wind up muddling my way through because I haven't gotten to that part of the book yet. And some of the stuff, I'm just looking forward to it. But the thing is that like I went and looked through some of the stimulus chapters. I didn't like deeply read or try and implement because I'm working through the book as I read it, right? I'm not just reading it for the gee whiz knowing this stuff. And it's been really, really easy to follow along with anything that I've done out of the book. So that I will definitely put forward. And it seems like you're offering up a lot of the stuff that I want to pick up that I just don't know yet. So when I go and look at the Strata section or the stimulus section, or right, it's like I've been doing stimulus for a long time, but I didn't know I could do that. Right.
Okay.
Or I'm curious, like if somebody's starting from like start to finish with the book, like how long until they have something like usable of an app that they can get a good feel for whether or not they like the framework or the direction it's going, kind of thing.
So I mean, I start with an authentication system. So I think like chapter 1 is just setting up the repos. Chapter 2 is text only intro to Hotwire. Chapter 3 you start actually building. So I think you build like users and signups, and chapter 4 is authentication, and then it kind of builds from there. So I think those chapter 3 and 4 do give you a good feel of the framework, but this book is not aimed at people who don't know Rails. So it's like I've kind of positioned it as a spiritual sequel to the Rails tutorial by Michael Hartle. Usual disclaimers of no affiliation and all that stuff. But so if you're starting my book, my understanding is you're already sold on Rails. You already have a basic understanding of it. So my aim was never to kind of give people a quick feel of the framework, because if they come to my book, they already like Rails. Was kind of like my thinking behind it. And Hotwire is now kind of like a part of Rails as well. So while it's kind of front and center because it's a new thing that people want to learn about, you could get a feel for it pretty quickly because, like I said, chapter 2 is a text only intro to what it is, to all the bits of it.
So if I wanted to commit a chunk of time to it, like start to finish, like about how long am I looking to like make it through the book and build an app kind of thing? Just so, because people out there too are curious, like, how long am I going to spend learning?
I honestly couldn't tell you because it's an absolute beast of a book. And it depends on like what your existing level of skill and knowledge is, because some things will take like, if you already know certain things, you can go through those a lot faster, and like you could just like copy paste code out of the book and just kind of skim through it if you already know it. But if you're newer to the framework, then those things will take longer. Given the fact that I actually don't know, I haven't spoken to anyone who has done the book cover to cover. I couldn't tell you how much time it could take because I couldn't even estimate it, to be honest. I mean, it just depends on the person.
I've been planning on that, but I haven't been tracking my time.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Because the book is such a beast. It's so big and detailed. I don't think anyone could just go into it and just do it cover to cover. I think a lot of people are dipping in and out of it, which is um, actually, I think maybe a weakness of the book is that it covers so much. But I did want to write like a comprehensive manual. So like another idea I'm kind of playing around with in my head is breaking the book down into like series of blog posts and then paywalling those. So like you have things like Go Rails and Drifting Ruby for screencasts, but you don't have anything in the Ruby world for like text-based education, which is like bite-sized text-based rather than like Go Rails is like bite-sized but video, right? So I think maybe I could think about something that's bite-sized but text-based, and then just have a subscription on that and seed that by breaking the book down into individual blog posts. So
You could use the new Once product by DHH. What's it called?
workbook, yeah, I did
Yeah.
see that. It was yeah, another idea that it's in the back of my mind. I'll definitely be downloading it when they release it, and I'll see what's what.
You'll have to download it and post it on the neighborhood marketplace.
Yep. Oh. Good deal. Anyway, I'll give you more feedback as I get through it. But like I said, my time's been pretty constrained. Once my kids are out of school, it should be better.
Well, it's good to hear the feedback you've got, and I hope you keep finding value in it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the other things that I'm just going to point out that I'm excited about is, building your own authentication and stuff. Because to be perfectly honest, I've never done that before.
Ah, okay.
So,
yeah. I kind of got the impression people are afraid of it, which is another reason why I wanted to write about it, is because it can be daunting, but I don't think it's something people should be afraid of necessarily.
I think people are just afraid of doing something that compromises their application.
Yeah. It can be a bit nuanced, but I think with the feature that Rails gives you out of the box with things like hash secure password and stuff, you're not gonna shoot yourself in the foot too badly. You might make an odd mistake or something. Like a common mistake that people make is when you store like a cookie. Bye, Valentino.
Adios, guys. I gotta run, but
no, all good.
So yeah, when you store a cookie that kind of authenticates the user, the only thing you put in that cookie is the user ID. And when it's just that cookie kind of forms a permanent key to your app. So if someone gets hold of that cookie, there is nothing you can do to stop them. And the Rails tutorial taught authentication that way, and it was a very common way of teaching authentication in Rails. Was you just store stick the user ID in an encrypted cookie. So like while a hacker could never see or modify what the user ID was, they could in perpetuity log in as that user, because there's not like the user ID doesn't change, right? There's nothing you can do to invalidate that cookie.
Value that, you can just
so that's why so that's why you need a second value. So you need the user ID and you need like an authentication token, and then you authenticate the user based on both those things. And if someone gets hold of that cookie, all you need to do is invalidate that session token, and that cookie is useless. So it's things like that where you'd end up shooting yourself in the foot, but those things can be fixed. You won't make some like an absolutely horrendous mistake if you use the tools that Rails gives you, because things like hash secure password is pretty battle tested. It's been out there for a while. So you won't make mistakes at like a cryptographic level necessarily. You'll probably just make more like product mistakes, which it's much easier to educate against.
Right. Makes sense. Cool. Well, it's been fun to kind of get to know your background a little bit.
Cheers. I hope people didn't get too bored of me rambling on, but yeah, it's fun to chat.
I find it fascinating. So the rest of y'all, I hope you did too. Let's go ahead and do some picks though and wrap this up. Do you have some picks?
Yeah, I got a couple. I haven't been doing a whole lot recently, but I did. I watched Enola Holmes 2, and then realized I didn't remember anything about the first movie, so I went back and watched the first movie as well. But yeah, I can wholeheartedly recommend both those movies. It's about, for anyone who doesn't know, it's about Sherlock Holmes' little sister, Enola Holmes, and it's very much she's the protagonist. The movies are very well made. So like, if you're a fan of Sherlock Holmes, like I am, you'll probably enjoy it. And it's very much like they kind of made the movie in a way that she is the central character. It doesn't feel like a bolt on into the Sherlock Holmes world or anything. It's very entertaining, very well done. So yeah, those two movies. Other than that, I'm on a current rewatch binge of Breaking Bad. I mean, I think is there anyone who hasn't seen Breaking Bad by this point? So I mean,
I
have you
haven't.
not? Oh
I have
wow.
no. I know I haven't. I
Okay.
will say. I mean, it looks fascinating.
It's a brilliant show. It's like I love Breaking Bad, but I'm a bigger fan of the prequel Better Call Saul, which is my favorite TV show of all time.
Okay.
So yeah, I rewatched Better Call Saul a couple of months ago, and I realized I hadn't seen Breaking Bad since Better Call Saul concluded, which was in 2022. So I figured, why not binge it again? So that's what I'm doing. So those are my picks: Enola Holmes 1 and 2, and Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I know. I watched the first Enola Holmes. I think I saw the second one. I don't know. Yeah, so the TV rewatch binge that I'm on, I know people are like, "What about board games?" I'll get to that. The one that I've been watching is The Walking Dead. And so I watched the first 4 or 5 seasons way back when they were coming out, and then I think I got caught up and I quit watching it. And so now that there are like 11 seasons, I'm kind of curious to see what I missed in the later the later episodes. So yeah, I've been watching that. I've been watching it on Netflix. Um and yeah, maybe I'll pick up Breaking Bad next. Some of these shows though, they get a little too gritty for my wife. And so
Okay.
Breaking Bad might be something I watch by myself.
Yeah, it can be a bit visual sometimes. They
Yeah,
don't really. Uh, it's not like Game of Thrones. It's not where like gore is like a unique selling point of the show. But
right.
when they want to make an impact, they don't shy away from it.
Right. Well, and that's the thing with Walking Dead is because I tried to get my wife to watch it and she just expressed no interest in it. But I think the overall premise, the story, the characters, I think she'd really get into it. But when I started rewatching it, I'm only like 4 episodes in at this point. Um, but yeah, I didn't realize how much gore there is in it with just, I mean, they have to shoot the zombies in the head. And so you see
Yeah,
just, they're blowing their brains out and stuff. And it gets a little bit graphic. Um, I think that's kind of the impact that they wanted to make though on screen, right? So anyway, but yeah, as far as board games go, so I'm gonna kind of pick a couple of things. So lately I've been playing games on Board Game Arena, and that's an online system for playing board games, and they actually have um, a developer toolkit for building games, so you can build card games or board games or whatever, right? And you can put the assets in, right? So you have a scan of the board and a scan of all the cards and everything. And anyway, it's pretty awesome. The games that I've been playing on there lately are challengers, and I've picked that before. And the other one that I've been playing is Lost Ruins of Arnak. Um, challengers is very approachable, fun game. It's kind of a deck building game and kind of I don't know exactly how to describe it. It's kind of like war, but it's not. Anyway, I really like it. And then, so effectively, every round you draw more cards out of the pile and you choose which ones to keep in your deck. And then they all have different values and different powers. And so, depending on how the play comes out, because you just pull the card off the top of your deck, you don't know what it is, right? You
yeah,
can you basically are just trying to beat the other person's last card. And anyway, it's pretty fun. You can play it up to like 8 players. And so then what happens is you rotate who you're playing with every turn. Lost Ruins of Arnak is much more involved. So you have worker placement, you have a tech tree, you have exploration. It's got a whole bunch of different elements. But it's probably one of my more beloved games that I play these days. So I'm gonna pick both of those. I'm not gonna go look them up on Board Game Geek. I don't remember what their weights are, but Challengers is very approachable for anybody, and Lost Ruins of Arnak is more for the hardcore board game players. And then on the technical side, so I've had a few things that I've been picking up lately, either because I'm trying to, learn a technology that I haven't used or haven't used in a while, for my contract, right? It's like, hey, they're using it, and so I've got to figure out how to, muddle through it and not make, fundamental mistakes on how I use it. And I get feedbacks on the PRs that I put in, so it's not bad. It's just anyway. But one thing that I picked up that I really, really like is Vite. So there's a Vite Ruby and Vite Rails gems, and we've had Massimo on the show before, I think, to talk about it. But it gives me hot module reloading, which I wasn't really getting for PropShaft or import maps. And the other thing is sometimes I felt like I had to fuss with stuff to get it to play nice with the import maps. And Vite Ruby, it just works. So I've been pretty happy with that. And yeah, now that I'm pulling in stimulus components and starting to get into using Turbo and Turbo Streams, yeah, that's been so super nice. The other end of it that I've also been liking, I never got into writing kind of the, what is it, feature or system level tests for Rails, right? I always wrote my unit tests, and then occasionally I'd write tests for other things if it got complicated. But lately I've gotten into Capybara, and it's because my client uses them on their stuff, right? To test their stuff. They use Capybara. And man, that's been super nice. Once I kind of got the hang of writing those specs, it's nice because it'll walk through the app and do the things, and you can enable the JavaScript, and it uses the Chrome driver, and right, so it'll test my Hotwire and everything. Because I'm not super keen on testing my front end JavaScript. I'm not. And for the most part, my stimulus controllers are very, very simple, right? It's, hey, make this show up and use the animations that I put on it. I mean, that's almost entirely what I've done so far. So the only tricky thing that I've had to do is I've had to figure out how to get one controller to trigger the method on another controller, right? So I have a button that makes something show up, and it's not really in the thing that makes it show up. So
Yeah.
anyway, I've had to figure that out. But
Were
other
you
than that,
using the Outlets API?
Outlets API.
Yeah, that's a mechanism for one stimulus controller to communicate with another stimulus controller.
The thing that I'm looking it up now because I didn't even know this was a thing. I was looking at, so on the reference under the controllers, it says you can use an event to trigger the other method, but I'll have to look at this because
Yeah, you can, and again, it just depends on your use case. So sometimes triggering an event is the right thing to do, but again, if you just look at the reference and on the left, you'll see a section for outlets.
yeah,
It might be that outlets are what you're looking for in this particular case.
yeah, I'll have to look at that because
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, I'll dive through it. But yeah, it'd be nice because all I'm looking for is like I have a menu. I have 2 menus, one that slides in from the left and the other that slides in from the right. And yeah, effectively I'm just looking for the one on the right. I have a button that's, in the middle of my page. And so I don't want to wrap the whole page in a stimulus component if I don't have
Yep.
to, or a stimulus controller. And so, yeah, I'm looking for, okay, if I click this link, it's going to open this other thing over here and make it slide in. And so I don't know if outlets is the right thing for that, or
Yeah, it might be actually. Yeah, just like without looking at the code, it's hard to say, but I have a feeling it would probably be the simplest way to do it.
okay, sounds good. Yeah, because I have to say the documentation on stimulus is not always as comprehensive as I would like it.
No, it isn't. Yeah.
And so what I run into is it's like, hey, you can do this and you can do this in this way. And it's like, okay, but my situation is just different enough.
Yeah.
Or you're not telling me which parts of this matter. And
Yeah.
so, right. So I'm trying to figure out, how to get the gears to mesh. And so I have to fuss with it to get it to go. And so, anyway.
Yeah, it can be a bit tricky just to get stuff working.
I'll look at that. That's good.
Yep.
That's a good tip. But anyway, so I am going to shout out Veet Ruby. That made my life simpler. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to pulling some of these gems out of this project and just writing myself. So, yeah. Anyway, we're pretty much out of time, so I'm going to wrap us up. And we'll talk about Bridgetown next week.
Yeah, sounds good. Another week of me rambling on. What could go wrong?
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time, folks, Max out.
All right, cheers. Goodbye.